Well, I want to take this. This is Tim McKinless calling, and I just wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of obviously their extremely busy schedules in this time. I know many people are approaching me, via Skype or via other things, and just saying, "How are you holding up?" And my typical response is, "This is not exactly the best time to be in human resources." If anything else, it's probably the worst time to be in human resources, but that's okay. So I was telling someone the other day as well. I said, well, it's always been kind of a rush to get the job done and everything else. I said, but now you can't even get to maybe 60 to 70% of your emails as they come in, and it seems like everyone is an expert in this subject that we're talking today. So, well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Once again, thank everyone for joining the call today, and also thank one for responding back to the SurveyMonkey for today's meeting. And it looks like overwhelming. The big issues are, of course, how do we administer, the sick leave, the Family Medical Act. Those are the two big gorillas that are in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act policy, or we're going to refer to that as the FFCRA. And the interesting thing is that just went into effect yesterday, April 1st. It was signed back on March 18th, but it went into effect yesterday. And that has those two big gorillas I mentioned to a moment ago, one being the paid sick leave, and the second part being the emergency medical leave, very similar to a family medical leave, but in this case it's paid. So with that being said, I can go into detail and kind of share with you some of the aspects of the policies and the procedures, but I think I'd like to just go ahead and kind of take a bird's eye view and just hit the real big issues that I've had to kind of address, or I think most of us have had to address thus far. Meaning, of course, an employee will go ahead and read, a policy on it, or maybe a statement, or they'll read it on their Facebook. And they come in the next day and they just say, okay, well, I'm signing up for this mandatory sick leave. And they're not sick, they haven't been diagnosed or anything else, but they see that it's paid, and so they're jumping on it. So what we need to do is just be educated so that when we respond back to them, we're using the correct terms that, to put it all in perspective. So what I mean by that is, first of all, what I'd like to do is find out, does anyone have an adopted policy regarding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act? Do they have a policy in place right now? Does anyone have one?
This is Stacy Palmer. We do at MS Consultants.
Okay, good, Stacy, good. And we do as well here at Prime. So that's what I'm going to recommend, is that individuals that are on this call, you may want to, reach out to us to see, do we have a policy? Maybe you can cut and paste it, or maybe take a look at it. Anyway, so that's something, or really you want it, you don't want to take a carte blanche. You do want it to at least take a look at it and maybe tailor make it into your old firm. Or actually you can, go online, you can pull out some of this stuff. There's a lot of information out there, but, once again, you just tailor make it to your firm, and then you should have a policy in place. And now it just so happens to be, we do have the FFCRA policy. Above and beyond that, we actually have recently introduced a communicable diseases workplace policy. And that one is, we're preparing for the future on that, meaning that there probably will be other communicable diseases, and how do we treat them? Whether it's, COVID-19, whether it's the flu, whether it's common cold, or anything like that. Underneath that overarching policy of communicable diseases within the workplace, things like stay at home and everything else, we do have an addendum we just put in place, which is really specific to the COVID-19. So it's addendum 1.1, and it's a COVID-19 general information, things like washing hands, how long do you wash hands, if you're sick, stay home, how would you be able to telecommute if possible, how do you determine that, any kind of forms that are associated with those requests, social distancing, many of the aspects that are in place right now, resources that are available, whether it's World Health Organization, the CDC, whatever it is. So actually, those are parts of what we have in place. So what I'd like to do is just recommend that each of us on the call, and maybe if we speak to a colleague somewhere, recommend that we at least have a policy in place that addresses this issue. And it's kind of a guideline, once again, what do we do, where do we go, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel again, because all this is new. All this is new. All right. So once again, I just wanted to mention that it's important to have these policies. And the two aspects that I wanted to follow up with regarding families first, aspect of, like I just mentioned, the sick leave. And I think it's important because the wording, from the government, and once again, the employees will go ahead and glean that specific word out that suits them. And so some of the aspects that I'm seeing within FFCRA is that employees will see that, it says, okay, if you're quarantined, let me look at the exact wording. It says, subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Well, because the individual, hears that, okay, you're in a stay-at-home aspect or anything like that, that is not a quarantine or isolation. But it's important to kind of focus on those words. Quarantine means that you are, in fact, being quarantined by a treating physician. You've been diagnosed as either having or the possibility of having, maybe until your test results come back, as having of COVID-19. So in those cases, you're asked to self-isolate by either federal, state, or local quarantine. So it's not just because they close the projects within a state that you're all of a sudden quarantined. And a big question to kind of validate this is the employee still able to go to the supermarket? Is the employee still able to go to a park? Is the employee still able to participate in, individual type activities outside the home? And if that's the case, then they're not quarantined or they're not being isolated. Does that make sense? Anyone? Okay.
Sorry, Tim. This is Tina. We had an employee that their doctor wrote them off starting 2 weeks. So I pulled the note up. It does not say anything about isolation or quarantine. So I'm looking at it now that he should be using sick leave that he has accrued, and we don't have to pay him per this policy that was released April 1st.
My one question with that is, was he diagnosed with COVID-19 or tested positive for COVID-19?
No. He's just in a high-risk category, kind of sinuses. The doctor just wrote him off for at home. There's nothing in the order that says anything about isolation or quarantine.
See, excellent question. Thank you very much. And that's the big key that you've got to really take a look at, is it seems like all of a sudden we, and employees are just in this direction, is that we've kind of forgotten what the standard status quo was previously. Okay, you have a doctor's slip, you're out, you can either take PTO or you can take it unpaid, however you want to do it. Bingo, you're done now. You introduce this, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden the employers are saying, "Oh, it's COVID-19 related or anything else." Well, the employee is not a physician, is not a Center of Disease Control. So in fact, you are. I think you're perfectly fine to have that employee take PTO. Go ahead, because like you said, that documentation doesn't support the COVID-19.
I would also recommend that you speak to the employee, because if there's intent behind it that he isolates, which is in category 1, if he's asked to isolate because of concerns related to COVID, if he has underlying conditions, that might have been what the doctor's intending. I would ask the employee to clarify that before I would say no. I would act on the conservative side there.
So that's the thing too. I was thinking, like, do you want to rock the boat even with the 1 or 2 requests? I mean, we're not a large company, but the 1 or 2 requests that might come through, is it just the 2 weeks and you move on, or I don't know if he's going to come back to work or not.
That's a very good point you're bringing up. and I support exactly everything that's been said thus far, is really at the end of the day, even there's kind of a zero sum in this whole aspect, because whatever, as long as you have it coded correctly, whatever you're paying this employee, as long as it's related to COVID-19, is basically tax deductible at the end of the year. So it's going to be more or less a pass through. So that's basically a win-win situation. But something that I've heard in the past as well is once that door is open, it's open. So that's another key point. Plus, what if all of a sudden this does become to have a huge price tag, and after the election, because let's not kid ourselves, this is all about the election coming up later this year. But with that being said, after the election, let's just say the government says, oh man, that had a heftier price tag than I thought. Ask for maybe some sort of a documentation or maybe an audit that you have to go through, or they'll ask our auditors to maybe confirm in one or two cases. And if you only have two cases, they'll probably, confirm both of them. Is what documentation do you have? And they may in fact come back and say, oh, by the way, you know what? You don't have anything stating it was COVID-19 related. So I agree with you 100%. Is communication is king on this case. And, just to reach out to the employee, because like I said, if they are in a high risk area or high risk, category, then that's perfectly fine and warranted. Employee to go back and get a little bit more clarifying data information from that treating physician. We'll always defer to the treating physician, just like any other case. Family medical leave, whether it's emergency or not, sick leave, always defer to that treating physician.
Well, and then remember, they can only use the 80 hours once in the 2020. So once they've used it, they can't come back and say they want to use it again. So, but I agree with the doctor.
But they can go on their other company benefits at that point.
They can. And so it'd be just like a normal circumstance at that point, so PTO, sick pay, whatever. But I do agree with the document would have that handy in case we're questioned.
Yes, this is Laura Ewell. Hey, I've had a couple of people request this leave also, and we've been required documentation, and so far people have had no trouble getting a doctor's note. And these have been people that I would consider in a high risk category. They have underlying health conditions and they want them self-quarantined. The approach that we've taken to it is, just like you said, Tim, at the end of the day, this is going to have a zero net effect because it's my understanding you're going to be able to take that tax credit at least when you file your 941, if not when you're remitting your payroll taxes each payroll.
Agreed. Exactly. It's at the end of the, was that a statement or that was a question? It sounded like a statement, correct?
I guess more of a statement. I mean, we're not taking, I guess we're probably being a little bit more, I don't want to use the word lax, but a little bit more. If there's one thing I've noticed is when this started, week by week, employees became more and more anxious over this whole situation. And we just felt like we better err on the side of, we'll require documentation, but I'm not going to get into quizzing them or, causing an inquisition.
Okay, agreed. And I think that's what's critical, within each of our organizations, because it's all governed by our culture. How much are we going to push? How much are we going to be lax? And there is no right or wrong answer. It just depends on who we are as an organization and our culture. And I strongly believe that a basic definition of culture is what are those behaviors that are rewarded and what are those behaviors that are punished or not rewarded. And that's really what culture comes down to. So that's basically it. But a key point that I wanted to also bring, and it kind of takes us to our next topic, is the aspect of telecommuting, because a big part of this is, should I say, a supporting pillar of this is the fact that this individual is unable to telework or telecommute or something like that. So if, obviously we heard earlier that there were still, individuals out in the field, there's still inspectors, things like that. working. If they were pulled off a project or unable to work due to a shutdown, then you're right, they can't telework at all. But most people that are like a GIS individual or a design engineer or an architect or, space planning, whatever, interior designer, all those positions, I would argue that every one of those positions are able to telecommute. Now, granted, that's our next part of our discussion is, the whole IT, the infrastructure, how do you connectivity, which has come up on the Survey Monkey. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware too, is if that person is able to telecommute and still do his or her job, then really everything else is kind of out the window. And I kind of like to open that up for discussion.
We actually have this situation right now where I think someone is applying for this to avoid using PTO when work isn't available because they are capable of working from home. And I'm rolling it around in my head right now what we do. My thought process is for the time that he needs to spend helping his school, that's what you claim under the paid sick leave or the emergency FMLA. But the time that you aren't working just because there's no work available, that's got to be PTO. What do you guys think?
Well, I've got my opinion, and I'll always chime in, but I'm hoping that maybe someone else can jump in. If not, I'll be happy to address, but I'll kind of let anyone else want to jump in before I do?
This is,
okay.
This is Rachel with Mannequin Smith. And what we've really done is if there's workload issues, we're trying to look at, does that work have to be done right now? Or is this work that we could spread out because, this is April 2nd. We don't even know what the end of April or May or June are even going to look like, because I don't think we're close to the end of this. So we actually have employee layoff on temporary layoff and collecting unemployment because they're going to make more money doing that than they're going to make using their PTO. And some of them don't have enough PTO. Some of them have very little PTO. So they're going to make more money on unemployment. And with the workload, we can justify that. It's not work that we have done right now, or someone else is able to do it, and we're able to keep somebody else at 40
right.
hours then. So we're really looking at everything on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and we're doing that too. This person is a salaried individual. So it's our hourly, that's really easy because we can just have them on reduced hours or flex their work or do a temp layoff. But yeah.
Okay, something else I'd like to kind of throw in the mix, and I do appreciate the comments thus far, is that, like you said, unemployment is still there, just like it was before. Some paid time off, we can lay people off. I know in our organization, we laid a couple of people off. We've actually reduced some hours in some cases. Other individuals have taken a voluntary, pay cut during this time. But in this case of a salaried individual, it really, salary's 24/7, basically. So, you're paid to get that job done. So with that being said, if an individual says, hey, I've got to help my children with their homework for, let's say, 2 hours, 3 hours a day or something like that. Well, okay, well, what about the other, 21, 22 hours a day? Granted, you're going to sleep, I get it, but you can work during the rest of the time. It doesn't have to be during normal business hours. So there's that kind of stuff. So this individual is taking sick, first of all, are they able to telecommute? If the answer is yes, it's pretty much, end of the story right there. Then go ahead and telecommute. If they're not performing in the way that they need to perform or not producing the work that they need to produce to be efficient, effective, then that's a performance issue. That's not necessarily, a time issue, but that's a difficult question to have. And once again, I'm kind of laying out not necessarily what we do, not necessarily what the culture of each individual organization will do. I'm just kind of throwing you out this is the basic legal parameters. And I've always had, I always tell people there's two answers to every question. There's the legal answer, which is the bare minimum. These are the things that you should be aware of. You have to comply to these aspects just to be legal. And then there's what I'll call the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is defined within each organization as what is your culture support? What do they want? You know, where are you going to lean? Where are you going to rest? Where are you going to walk? Where are you going to run? That kind of thing. So each one's got to be tailor-made for your individual organization to support, you know, the do's and don'ts as they go. So with that being said, you know, we'll throw that out. As first of all, you know, are they able to telecommute? If they're able to telecommute, then really the rest of it's pretty much a non-event. Second of all, you know, if they're not able to telecommute, then you can kind of get into, okay, is it sick leave? Is it not sick leave? Does it qualify under COVID-19? Is it due to childcare? What documentation are you going to ask for, if any? Things like that. But once again, I just wanted to put that first and foremost. Are you able to telecommute? Yeah, I've got a laptop. As a matter of fact, I VPN in, or I remote desktop, or log me in, whatever it happens to be. If you're able to do it, and if you're doing your job, end of story, you're doing good. It's just whether you're sitting in your office or whether you're sitting in your pajamas with fuzzy slippers. As long as you get the job done, I think that's all we care about at the end of the day. Okay, I just spewed a lot, so go on. Is there any comment on what I just said? Okay. All right, sorry if I got off on my soapbox a little bit.
No, I think it's good information. For me, I think once I really sat back and read this policy, and SHRM has a great example out there that I use for our company to put one out. Just a heads up, they have that in the request form for the emergency portion of it. But I think, you know, just, you know, you get all this anxiety around it. You just step back and realize that the gate does not open unless they can't work from home. And that eliminates the majority of our organization being eligible for it. So it just calmed everything down once we kind of got through that understanding.
And that's the key right there. And that's what we're all support group. No, I'm not ready to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but gall darn it, it's pretty good to just have that backup that we have through ACEC and everything else. So it's, you know, it's nice to share this information and, like you said, weather the storm a little bit and to realize what's really important and what's just kind of a lot of hoopla. But it is critical. I mean, everyone's on this bandwagon. Geez, oh Pete, you sit there and watch, you know, Trump every night, you know, talk about all this kind of stuff. And so this is important. What's kind of funny is my wife asked me this morning, she said, you know, everyone's treating this so critically. Do they know something we don't? And I just kind of looked at her. I said, okay, what kind of government conspiracy are you forming here? And for some reason, I had to shut up and leave. So good thing I'm at work today.
Tony, Fred Sealing here. I listened to a webinar ACEC National had about tax implications of all of these benefits. And one of the things the presenter, in particular, if you're working on contracts that are based on hourly rates of pay, their recommendation probably is that instead of giving people pay cuts, you would probably be better off reducing hours in an equivalent fashion in order to make the bottom line work better. And also, if you ever were to get audited on what those rates of pay were, because you went in pay rate reduction. So just something to consider. We haven't gone there, but gave me something to pause and think about.
Good point. Excellent point. You're right. If those pay cuts are probably going to be maybe your senior echelon that aren't necessarily, you know, very billable, maybe some of your marketing, business development type individuals, not your seller doers, but your sellers, you know, that might be part of it. But yeah, you're right. It's not a well perceived, not a well received, not really a big thing that, you know, anyone wants to use. I support that 100%. Is that, you know, we as organizations, what do we sell? We sell time. You know, it's going to take me 10 hours to do this. It's going to take me 20, 50, 100. And then we have that hourly billable rate, you burned, unburdened. And then, you know, and that's what the cost of the project is. So you're right. You don't want to, you know, cut your nose to spite your face, as they say. So that's a critical point that you just bring up is, you know, don't touch the sacred cow as far as the pay rate. Okay. Is there any more questions regarding communicable diseases or the FFCRA or anything like that? And if not, we'll move on to maybe some of the like IT aspects that we're trying to, I guess, evaluate, or do we want to go a little bit more into the FFCRA?
I've got a question for you guys if no one else has anything, but before we move on, I do have one.
Please proceed.
So I don't know how many of you guys are looking into the payroll protection program that's out there. And for anyone who is, I'm wondering if you guys have heard about the interaction of that and these paid leave programs, because the payroll protection program, if you get the loan, which turn into a grant if you use it for 75% of your pay, 75% of that for your payroll, do you then use that in place of these programs for now?
So my understand, this is Lori, my understanding is that if you get that grant money, that at least our plan is that we would bring back people that we furloughed, because you have to, it's pretty complicated, all of the data that you got to put together, and
Right.
there's some disagreement as to, you know, just exactly what the periods are that you're looking at. But my understanding is that you have to maintain the same level of payroll and FTEs as of certain points in the data. So I don't think it affects any tax credits that you take, at least that I've read, that you've taken for people that are using the sick leave or the emergency FMLA. But anybody that you furloughed, you probably want to take a hard look at bringing them back, or anybody that where you've reduced hours.
Okay. And then, but go ahead.
Real quick, this is Holly Roberta with ACEC Ohio. I just wanted to let you all know we're actually having a webinar hosted today at 4:30 on the Paycheck Protection Program presented by Somerset CPAs. So they're going to be answering like any and all questions about the Paycheck Protection Program and talking about it there. If you wanted to log on to that at 4:30, the registration's free and open right now, and we'll also be sending out a recording of that too, just so you're aware.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Okay, anything else regarding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act or anything like that? Maybe associated with this before we move on as well. And one of the aspects that did come up within the survey asked is that how do we get individuals to take this serious, or to get everyone to embrace social distancing, things like that. Now earlier, just a few moments ago, we did have a comment that stated, you know, people now are taking this a little bit more serious than they did at first. And you know, I'm raising my hand right now. I was one of those people that just kind of poo-pooed the whole thing, said, yeah, okay, you know, this will never happen to me. But now it's, and I still hope it's not going to happen to me or anyone on the call right now or anyone else that we know, but a little bit more serious. And am beginning to think in the back of my mind when I walk down a hallway, and if there's somewhere there, will I step aside, you know, keeping that 6 foot or more distance, let them pass, and then resume my walk, things like that. So I, for one, am taking it a little bit more personal just because of all probably the information that's been given. But I guess has anyone else on the call either experienced maybe a nonchalant type attitude toward the social distancing, the hand I suppose we don't know about the hand washing, but the social distancing, the, you know, wiping down countertops, or community things like the coffee maker or vending machine after they use it. What I call is like the exercise room mentality. You know, just like when you're at one of the exercise places, you pretty much walk around with a little wipe and wipe down the machine when you're done. You know, is that what we start doing here within the organizations? But has anyone else either found difficulty in staff embracing social distancing, or maybe aspects that would help others get people to embrace social distancing? Is there anything out there?
I've got, this is Scott Frank with DLC Corporation, and I've got a couple of comments on that. And the first one is I will tell you that what usually lends itself to success here is a leadership top-down approach. If the leaders are taking it seriously, then the people understand that the leaders are taking it seriously, and they can parse out, which things we're serious about and which things we're not serious about. So getting your owners or your leaders in front of the company and talking about it rather than pushing out policies on paper, is much more effective for us. And we've used the remote technologies to do that several times, and that's done a lot to get people on board. And the other comment I have is, you're never going to direct or write policies that change people's minds. So that people are going to be who they're going to be. They're going to believe what they want to believe. We just have strong policies in place, and we expect people to follow them, and then we do what we can to make sure that they're following them. Whether or not they believe in it, or whether or not they are doing it for themselves or for their coworkers is not really part of the decision-making process from our standpoint. It's a rule, you have to follow it.
Oh, thank you. Those are good words. Very good words. So on that side, is there anyone that has either observed, I'll just say observed, maybe either leadership or individuals or anyone that has gotten the for example, the social distancing and anything else. And one example I will share is that we have a Baltimore office, and the receptionist actually took yellow tape and put it on the floor in front of around the reception area. That is a 6-foot radius for people to, kind of observe and be aware that, they're kind of in her 6-foot space at that time while she's sitting at the front desk. So those are kind of interesting ways to do it. Has anyone done anything similar to that, or maybe kind of a fun kind of a thing, or maybe a jovial type attitude towards the social distancing? Something like you just mentioned. You can't change a person's attitude or thought process unless they want to. So if you make it fun, sometimes they want to join in on the fun and the levity. So has anyone done anything similar to that?
The only thing we've done is before the stay-at-home order, when it was just the social distancing, in our conference rooms, we pulled away, in our big conference room, we only had every third chair at the table, and all the rest of them were pushed back against the wall, just as a reminder to people, don't sit close. And then we have signs up as to how many people could be in each conference room, that kind of thing. So just kind of something that's always in your face, a reminder, because people, like everyone said, we have people that are way extremes, people that are totally freaked out and are going to do everything they absolutely can, and then people that are like, whatever, this isn't going to apply to me. So just if we could kind of keep it in everyone's face of, we have wipes in all the common spaces and hand sanitizer, that kind of thing. So that's just kind of the approach we've taken.
Commendable. I applaud those efforts. So it sounds like you've really incorporated visual cues to keep reminders. That might be something like in the restroom, maybe a little poster taped on the mirror that says, wash your hands and sing happy birthday twice. And, those little things, like we said, thanks for sharing that, because it's those little things that people will, at first they'll kind of, oh man, this is crazy, but then they're doing it after a while, because they kind of get part of, I want to be part of the process. And I like the thing about the chairs too, is, like every couple of them, it's a visual cue. It's something like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to not sit next to someone. Or it's that, just like, what is that 6-foot diameter kind of situation? Just to give you a frame of reference from time to time, just to remind you, that's all it is. And I think that's the first and foremost thing that we can do as organizations, to get that through. And like we said earlier, you can write the policies, but that doesn't necessarily make it happen. We've got to enforce those policies, and that's how we're enforcing them, is these day-to-day activities, such as the visual cues, such as the communications that go out, such as leaders demonstrating exactly what's going on and how to do it. Critical, very important. Thank you for those comments. Okay. The other thing, before we move on to more of an IT or telecommuting or anything like that, well, I guess it really is telecommuting, things like that. So one of the questions that came up is that there's mass telecommuting, workplace connectivity. Are any of the organizations on the phone today experiencing like a lot of lag regarding, hitting firewalls or anything else regarding so many employees working from home and sharing files? Okay. How about any difficulties in getting employees set up from work from home? Excuse me. The two things that I've seen thus far have been typically if an engineer or whoever it happens to be has a laptop, then we can allow that employee to take that laptop home and then connect remotely via a VPN. And that requires a license, but what they're doing is, they're just, like I said, communicating remotely onto the networks and everything else. Now that might cause maybe for the license for the VPN, go in, download a big file you need on a server, and then jump off the VPN. Then you can work on it and then upload it later. But the other aspect would be is if that person has a desktop, the big box. You probably as an organization don't necessarily want the employee to start lugging that desktop around and those extra monitors and everything else. So in those cases, it's probably a different connectivity aspect, not necessarily VPN, but one of these other aspects or apps that I did refer to a moment ago, like remote desktop, which is Windows, or Log Me In, which is different, Citrix, which is a different type situation. So those will be the ones that you might use for individuals that are actually accessing their desktop at work to, access files. So anybody have any questions regarding that, or is anyone doing something innovative that's really working that they would like to share? Okay. Does everyone, anyway, does anyone not know what I refer to when I talk about a VPN or a remote desktop or anything else? Any questions on that?
Yeah, Tim, our organization hasn't had any issues with that. We did a business continuity test several weeks ago where we had everybody work from home. We even had some of our desktop users take their desktops and their monitors home and had worked out the bugs before the shelter in place was issued in the state of Ohio. So we've been able to stay up and running pretty well for people that have work.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Well, that is nice. So that you are an organization that said, yes, go ahead, take your desktop, take your monitors, take whatever you need, and see you when this is over.
Yep.
Okay. And it's working.
So far. Just got to keep the work coming.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Well, that is a nice segue into the next topic I'd like to go ahead and begin, and that is how to keep a remote workforce productive and engaged. And that is that's been a question on the table for a long time. As a matter of fact, I used to work for an IT firm. We did a lot of veterans administration work, and that was a common aspect of supervisors that really had some difficulty. How do you keep that employee engaged? How do you keep that employee productive? And that's kind of what we were just talking a moment ago regarding the salaried employee that, is kind of like, well, I'd really rather spend time with the kids than I would working, or I'd really rather take PTO, but hey, seeing as all this is out there, I'm going to see if I can float this and keep my PTO. So really, that's a good question, is how do you keep the remote workforce productive and engaged? And I did just mention about the IT firm I used to work for, and something that we had promoted in our project managers who were supervisors, and they were all PMP certified. And with those individuals, a lot of times it would be, management by goals. They would have daily, and sometimes daily wasn't really optimal, so they would have at least 2 calls with the team a week. So it would almost be, instead of having a weekly team meeting, they would have a call every other day, or like every Monday and Wednesday, or Tuesday and Thursday, something like that, just to keep the team engaged, talk about different projects that are going on. It would be no more than half an hour in length, but they would go over some of the topics, some of the deliverables, bam, 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 so everyone on the team knew what the other person was doing. But it does create a little more work for the supervisor, or in my case, it was project manager, but a little work for that case to keep that team on task, to keep them productive, knowing what was expected. And part of it was, okay, what are we doing? Like on Tuesday, we'd say, all right, let's just say we have it every Monday and Friday, or every Tuesday and Friday. So on Tuesday, you say, okay, what are my expectations of what's going to be done by Friday? Or what are you, Tim, going to accomplish by Friday? What are your goals for Friday? And then all of a sudden, come Friday, I'd say, okay, Tim, did you finish these goals? And you can say, yes, I did them and more. Or no, I didn't do it because of this, this, and this. So anyway, it gives you, before it gets too far down the track, it gives you an option to not only engage the employee, but to manage him or her much more effective. Now, not every position is able to do that, but a majority of them are, especially when you give it to the employees. What do you think you can accomplish by their next call? And then you follow up, like, did you get a chance to accomplish it? Yay, nay. And then if you're falling behind, then maybe other team members can help you out with that as well. So I guess with that being said, is there anyone else out there that's had some experiences or is currently working on anything on how to keep the remote workforce productive and engaged, or even better yet, how do we manage a remote workforce? Because many of us, this is new ground for us. We're hoeing a new field, and right now we're turning over some rocks, and we want to get those rocks out of there. So any comment? Okay. All right.
Well, we are actually having our leaders hold at least a weekly call with their people. Some people are doing it more frequently, just to first check in and see how they're doing. We are, I would say, 95% working remote right now, because obviously we can all do field work. We have our field people that are still engaged and out in the field, and we have procedures in place for them. But we're also doing all company calls on Monday mornings, just to kind of tell people what we've learned, talk about the business and how they can help if we need it, or celebrate if we had a good week, and just kind of keep them informed. And those are like 10-minute calls. They're not long, but I think it's really important that they hear our CEO's voice. And then, I'm adding in if there's anything that's pertinent. But we're doing a ton of communication and just, checking on people here and there. And we're also trying to be as flexible as possible, knowing that people we've always had the ability to work from home, but now you throw kids into the mix and school and trying to be a part-time teacher, especially if they have elementary school age children or younger who were in daycare. I mean, it's complicated for our people. So the more we show we care about them, I feel like we've got great people on our team, the more they're going to figure out how to get everything done they need to. So that's what we're doing.
Well, that's excellent. Like you said, once a week, just to hear that voice. And good. I'm sorry. Was there anything else to be added?
Well, I think, one of the challenges for us is, we are traditionally kind of an old guard philosophy here. So we didn't have very many people working from home. There just was not that level of trust at the employee level for managers to let the leash off and let their people work from home. So it was relatively rare here. My question is what's going to happen on the other side of this? We've already got employees, usually the younger employees, who have become kind of accustomed to this already, and they're asking, hey, what's it going to look like on the other side of this? Are we going to be able to stay like this? Are we going to be able to continue to work from home? Those are the kinds of questions that I think we're going to be left to deal with, because quite honestly, after the first couple of weeks, there's every evidence that people are as productive at home as they are in the office. So, what becomes our excuse to tell them they have to come back?
Do you need one?
That depends on who you ask.
I've always looked at it as it's a privilege, right? So if you can be productive at home and you're connected to the office, you're engaged, then more power to you. But they've got to be there for peers, for clients, and for if they're a supervisor, it might be a little harder. But if they can show they can engage their team and be available for them, that's fine. But I mean, I would really challenge the, do you need to make them come back if they don't want to work in the office all the time? Maybe it's, you got to be there 2 days a week. You got to show up for meetings. You can't do them all by phone. But I would really think about that.
I think that's fair.
Oh, agreed and supported. Like I said, it's always critical, especially during a kickoff or something that's similar to that when you're really making those initial, not references, but the initial relationships that you're kind of building, that you do that more of a face-to-face. And as the team progresses and matures, yeah, that's perfectly fine to go ahead and, have more conference calls and things like that. But at first you do want to have a little bit of, face-to-face interaction, putting a face with a voice, and then moving forward from there. And once again, building that relationship on a foundation of excellence, basically, is what you want to do. So with that, it is important. And then, like I said, when they start coming back and they say, you know what, I'd really like to work from home, evaluate it on a case-by-case situation, and then once again, kind of come up with a criteria to say, well, really, your position doesn't really lend itself to working from home, or it might lend itself to working from home. Like, how did you do when you were working from home? Were you kind of marginal, or, do we need you here all the time? Because really, there's nothing that's going to replace, like I said, we have been the old guard, and I agree with that 100%, is to see that person working with someone else, looking over their shoulder at a plan or plans, and then all of a sudden they come back with, with a good idea. And, oh, here's what we need to do. And here's where maybe an individual that isn't necessarily high in capability, but high in energy, now I'm kind of getting back to the whole Ken Blanchard situational leadership thing, is that if you've got an individual that's been there and knows what to do, then that's probably a little bit more open to working from home, but all of a sudden you lose that mentoring-mentee relationship that may occur within the office. So just because the person wants to work from home doesn't mean it's beneficial for both the employee and the employer. So that's part of that, that give and take. But I agree with you 100% as well, is that working from home is or should be treated as a perk, a luxury, something that, maybe it is, 1 day a week, or maybe it's, 2 or 3 days a week. But there will be times that person may be required, whether it's whether it's project related or not, that employee should come into the office just to share that expertise. And vice versa, if a person's fairly new, high energy, low experience, then you probably want that person in on an office so he or she can receive that one-on-one training, that mentorship, the coaching, everything that needs to happen. So like I said, each situation is very unique and different on the individual, different on the needs for both. So excellent discussions. All right. So what I'd like to do, it looks like we've got roughly 9 minutes, and I did want to have maybe a quick little question and answer at the very end if possible, but I did want to possibly just hit for a brief moment on the employee mental and emotional health, because I think that's what we've all been leading up to thus far, is because we're really doing this on behalf of the employees. We're trying to help everyone maintain a little bit of sense of, civility, a sense of senility, a sense of, calmness in this crazy storm tempest that we're in right now. And so, of course, I'm sure most of us probably have an employee assistance program, but for those that don't, I think it's nice to have maybe some sort of a hotline, or if we just to recognize if there's an employee that's feeling a little isolated, if there's an employee that does need to, maybe a little more work, maybe a little bit more social activity, maybe a little bit more something. How do we monitor? How do we track that? How are we aware of that? Because we can't sit there and check on every employee every minute of every day, but we do need to be accessible. And sometimes we're not the best person to be accessible, but we can at least direct them to resources that are available, which might be maybe a blog through the company. It might be, Twitter on the company. It might be, something else. Let's use the resources that we may or may not have, and then, expedite it. It might be an employee assistance program if they're feeling lonely or just need to talk to someone. I'd like to maybe just open it up right now to any ideas regarding employee mental and emotional health during these times when I think all of us are feeling a little bit more alone than we were a couple months ago.
Hi, this is Karen Ferguson with Prime. One thing I just tried to mention, and I also put this in the chat, is just try to keep the energy high around, the celebrations you used to share as a social group. We have, for example, a yoga instructor as one of our employees, and she's trying to set up a weekly meditation or online yoga class that we could all do together over lunch. Remember to acknowledge those birthdays and anniversaries that were within your groups so people don't feel lost or forgotten. Just a couple of ideas.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, some of the recognition aspects that you used to do in the office can still continue. You don't have everyone around a big table. Now you've got everyone around their phones, and you're still recognizing, like you just mentioned, maybe an anniversary, potentially a birthday, and then have whatever you want, a virtual cake or whatever it happens to be. I'm not sure, but keep those recognition programs going that were in place, prior to this craziness. But I think that's how we started the conversation is, we all need something else to do, like a hole in the head, because it's been so crazy busy. But these are things that we were doing previously. So that would be a good thing to continue and have that employee think, geez, now we're working from home. We don't do celebrations anymore. Or, geez, oh, Pete, now I've got, my birthday was this month, and last month they celebrated someone else, and now, I missed my month or something like that. So thanks, Karen, for adding that as well. Anyone else do anything that's, somewhat unique to keep employees, I would say mentally stable, but we work in the AA industry, so I'm not going to say that. Okay, what I'd like to do is maybe just go around the table and ask anyone, if they have any specific questions that maybe we either did not address or glossed over, that they're looking for a little additional information, or just maybe like a topic for a future discussion or anything like that. So I guess just anyone, if you like to go ahead and talk about, let me just see who's around there. So let me just see. Scott, are you still on the call?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay. Do you have anything you would like to add, or anything that you thought maybe we gleaned over or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
All right. How about Lori? How about you? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good. Thanks for hosting this.
Okay. Karen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thanks.
Okay. April, do you have anything you'd like
Just
to add?
a couple quick things. We use Skype for Business as our phone system for the company. If you guys don't, it's a quick, easy install and really good. They're pushing everyone towards Teams. It's amazing. But we're trying in small groups to say use your video. I know that people are rolling out of bed and coming to their home office or whatever they're doing, but use your video when you can. We do a leadership call at the end of every single day, and we all have to turn on our videos. And there have been times I've worked out in the afternoon and I just come as I am to the video call. It kind of helps bring a sense of levity to it all. And then two, tell people to call more than email. So people's default is email, and when you're in an office, that kind of works. But now that if people are dispersed, just pick up the phone and call and talk to each other. That helps that mental state too.
Those are very good words. Thank you. So use Skype or whatever it happens to be. I think, what is it, MS?
Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever your thing is.
Good. I like that. And I'm making a note here as well. Is call more, email less. Yes, yes, yes. I love that. Good. All right. We're going to keep going. And how about Fred? Do you have anything you would like to add?
I've got a question about privacy issues. We have a staff member, 96-year-old mother, recently passed away with COVID. Our staff member works out in the fields, so they weren't in the office. They also were not permitted to visit the facility she was in because they were shut down over all of this. The obituary came out in the local newspaper, and and stated that the cause of her death was COVID. So it's public information, but yet I'm not sure how much of that anything more than that, if we can really relate to staff members who may have concerns. I had one staff member reach out to us who said, "Hey, I noticed this," and basically regurgitated what was in the obituary, plus the fact that he had not been allowed to visit her. But these are pretty sensitive things, and as I understand it, for the most part, you got to be pretty generic about the information you dispense with. Any advice or thoughts?
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'll just go ahead and say a word and then open it up as well. So thanks for sharing that question. It kind of comes back to the situation that we used to follow regarding harassments and things like that. Is like if you should have known or do know, whether you knew or not, should you have known? And in this case, like you just mentioned, it was public knowledge. So I'm going to say, yeah, that's perfectly fine that you use that, and then approach the employee to either take a 14-day, self-quarantine, or have the employee maybe go go to the doctor to see if they exhibit any symptoms. Like I said, if they don't exhibit, doesn't mean they do or don't have it. But I don't think it's necessarily wrong to require that employee or speak to that employee regarding did they in fact come in contact with anyone at that funeral. And the reason I would even say that is because look at a lot of these cities, a lot of it was funeral related, where some of the coronavirus was distributed and shared amongst funeral members. So I think it'd be perfectly fine to request that employee. And here's a personal example of what we did. And this was a couple weeks ago. Is I was in the office, and all of a sudden someone let me know that there was a young lady in part of the office that had, actually the young lady had emailed our IT department and said, yes, I was just tested for COVID-19. And that was the email. And so I followed up. I walked over there, and they shared it with me, obviously. So I walked over to her cubicle, and she's sitting there, and I said, hey, I pulled her to the side, and both Karen and I were talking to her. And I just said, so, were you tested? She said, yes. I said, do you have the results? She said, no. I said, well, then I'm going to escort you out of the building. And I physically escorted her out of the building. And everyone else around that she was working very closely were rolling their eyes, very upset. And anyway, the long story short on this one, or in my case, probably short story long, but in this case, she actually tested negative. Or actually, she wasn't tested. She just had flu-like symptoms, and the doctor did not think that they warranted testing. So she was not tested, but the doctor just had her off on flu-like symptoms for a few days. Actually, she's still not back to work even now. So it's gone beyond the 14 days anyway. But if that's the case, it kind of comes down to, when do the needs of many outweigh the needs of few? And I get what your question began with regarding the privacy aspect. So you do try to keep that, one-on-one conversation, but the privacy aspect was kind of usurped, once the obituary was called in. I'm just going to leave this to open comments on that. Anyone else like to add?
Well, it's come up a couple of times, and it's going to come up more and more. And my default has been to go to the employee and just tell them, look, people around you are going to be nervous and upset. Do you mind if I share this information? And it can be as basic as, yes, you were tested, or no, you weren't tested, or what have you. Getting that consent from the individual allows you to share that information. So in this kind of environment where people are freaking out all the time about those kind of things, I haven't had anybody tell me no, they don't really want to share that information with anybody. They recognize the situation, are very willing to allow us to share that information.
Okay, good point. Does that help, Fred? Does that help at all?
Yes, that's helpful. Fortunately, in this case, there was no funeral. Cremation took effect right away, and they're doing something later once all this blows over, hopefully.
Oh, and that's what you find. I think everyone, as a matter of fact, we had one individual, and then we're going to finish because we're already 3 minutes over. I apologize. But we had one individual that actually was it was an intern in one of our offices. And his girlfriend was over in Rome, Italy, right during the height of this, and was asked to leave, meaning all the Americans were evacuated out of Rome. And so she was coming back. And of course, he's in college, so he's thinking, I've got to go see my girlfriend. And I just told him, I said, well, you know what? That's your prerogative. That's perfectly fine. I said, but if you go see her, I don't know if she had it or not or been tested or anything else, but she came from a hot spot. So I said, that's fine. But if you go see her, then in fact, what's going to happen is we're going to have you stay home for 2 weeks, and we don't have any work for you. Right or wrong, I don't know. But anyway, so that's what I said. Well, he ended up waiting weeks before seeing her. And it came up a couple times because he called me and said, Tim, you know what? I really want to go see my girlfriend. I said, I know you do. I'm sure you do. But, and that's fine if you do. But just know that we probably won't have any work for you. We can't let you back in the office and potentially infect other people. So that was just kind of a situation that was a one-off that I really felt for the young man. But I think in the meanwhile, it's been a couple weeks, so I think he's happy and we're all moving forward. So just as an example. So with that being said, Tina, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, thank you for the call today. It would just be helpful, maybe, I don't know, every other week, could we check in with each other and have a call like this just to see? I mean, there's going to be so many new developments, I think, that happen on a daily basis. It's just helpful to check in and see what other firms are doing.
Holly, I'm going to defer that to you.
Yeah, I'm going to send out a post survey once we get off the call to see from everybody that attended when they want to meet next, just if they want to make this a weekly call or every other week. So once we get some information back, then I'll send out the next calendar reminder for the next phone call.
Sounds good. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
It'd be beneficial. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone I missed that would like to either add a comment or a suggestion or anything else at this time?
This is Rachel with Mannequin Smith. I just have a suggestion for future. A future is if we can maybe talk about employees re-entering the workforce and how suggestions on how to make that a smooth process. I had a field employee who the projects got shut down. So I did a layoff with him yesterday, and his response back to me was, so as soon as this stay-at-home order is completed, I can return to the job site the next day, right? And I said, well, I'm not sure we're all going to get back to work immediately the next. So maybe if that's a topic we could do on another call, that would be beneficial.
Excellent suggestion. Excellent. All right. Okay. Anyone else have a last comment or suggestion before we sign off? All right. Well, hearing none, thank you once again for all your time and your busy schedules. And I'm just glad we're all still working. That's a good thing. Let's find that silver lining. And we will talk again soon. So once again, thank you all for your time, and thank you, ACEC Ohio, for sponsoring this call today.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.